Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's information session to discuss the Summer Accelerated Learning Bootcamp. We are excited for this new opportunity, and we're so glad you're here. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, share a professional win from 2022, and we'll get started here shortly. Well, again, thank you all for joining us today and for introducing yourself in the chat. My name is Elizabeth Eaton. I'm a technical assistant specialist with the Region 8 Comprehensive Center, or Region 8 for short. Today, we're going to be sharing information about a new opportunity from Region 8, the Summer Accelerated Learning Bootcamp. The bootcamp is designed for district teams to support the development and implementation of evidence-based accelerated learning instructional practices for 2023 summer programming. So just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started, and I will introduce my colleagues here in a second. We'd ask that you stay on mute when you're not speaking. We'll have some time at the end of our discussion to open up the lines and have a conversation, ask questions, all of that good stuff. And of course, feel free to ask any questions or share comments, reflections in the chat. We will be asking for your input on some planned bootcamp activities through several polls today. So thank you in advance for sharing that feedback with us. And then one last thing, we are recording today's session to share it with those who could not join us today. So any questions before we get started? All right. Well, with that, I'm pleased to introduce my colleagues with the Region 8 Comprehensive Center who are joining us for today's session. Today's info session. I'm pleased to introduce TJ Horwood, one of our esteemed co-directors for the Region 8 Comprehensive Center. I'm also joined by Amir Davis, my fellow TA specialist with Region 8. You'll be hearing from Amir shortly, but first TJ is going to kick us off with an overview of the Region 8 Comprehensive Center team and a bit of background for this exciting new project. So TJ, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So Region 8 CC is one of 19 federally funded regional centers across the US, and we're kind of smack dab in the middle here, serving 3 states of Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. We provide ongoing intensive capacity building services to state, regional, and local education agencies and schools. And so our overall purpose, just to give you a sense of what we do, we help educators implement evidence-based practices to continuously improve the quality of instruction and educational outcomes for all students. And we do that through setting up annual service plans. Those help us to address high priority needs of SEAs in meeting Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, student achievement goals, as well as priorities established by the U.S. Department of Education in each of our 3 states. And one of those big priorities over the past few years and now has been and is the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP, and with that, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, which is called ESSER, as many of you know. So through ESSER, we are excited to have the opportunity to enhance these intensive capacity building efforts. And through this, we are able to support LEAs in using ARP ESSER funds for learning recovery activities. And so we've set up this initiative through some of the supplemental funding that we received this year. Our overall approach for this initiative follows sort of 3 broad purposes of this funding: using the one-time funds to respond to immediate needs, planning for longer-term recovery efforts, and developing plans for leveraging other federal funds along with state and local resources to sustain these critical services beyond ARP-ESSER funding period. So this initiative supports LEAs to utilize ARP-ESSER grant funding for evidence-based strategies to address the impact of lost instructional time. And we've identified summer as what our focus is for Region 8. So we're offering this initiative to LEAs within our region. The program also has a focus on the specific needs of students who are disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So for example, underserved students such as multilingual learners, students with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, and others. So for more information on the Region 8 CC, you can visit our website, which I saw Stephanie put in the chat for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth to start telling more about this initiative.
Great. Thanks so much for that helpful overview, TJ. So let's talk a little bit about the need for accelerated learning as part of summer programming for 2023. First things first, a great respect to all of our educators who are on the line in our region across the country, who were in districts and schools during the COVID pandemic. You all worked extremely hard to mitigate the negative impact of COVID on our region's students during a very difficult time. As TJ mentioned, we know that some students were disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also know that learning recovery for all students following the COVID-19 pandemic remains a work in progress in Region 8 states, as well as across the country. And as reported in EdWeek, many educators are already bracing for a so-called summer slide, but new research suggests that the so-called coronavirus or COVID slide could be significantly worse. And accelerated learning looks to fill in some of the learning gaps and keep students moving forward on their intended grade level trajectories by strategically preparing them for success in current grade level content. So I'm going to turn it over to Amir to talk us through some of the data to further make a case for why accelerated learning can help address the impact of lost instructional time and support learning recovery. Amir?
Thank you, Elizabeth. So on this slide, we have the NAEP results from 2019 to 2022. And along the y-axis, you have the academic performance on the NAEP, just sort of in quartiles, where the higher performing students are in the 90th percentile, and the lower performing students are in the 10th percentile. Along the x-axis, we have their results from 2019 to 2022, and you can see an increase or decrease in their score. So I'll pause right there for about 30 seconds to allow you to look at the results, and we'll join. We'll join back in about 20 seconds. If you can put in the chat any reactions, observations, wonderings that you have as you're looking at this data. One thing that I see as I'm looking at this data is in fourth grade math, students who are in the lower performing quartile or percentile had a more robust COVID slide. The inverse is true for eighth grade. We actually see the folks who are in the lowering percentile, they actually did not experience that much of a slide. Well, it was a robust slide, but not as much compared to the folks in the higher performing quartile. And I'm already thinking, right, I'm putting on my school employees hat. I'm already thinking about those individual students or those groups of students that would benefit from whatever intervention that we come up with. So I'm sure you've analyzed data in your schools, in your districts around student learning. Actually, go back to the last slide. I'm sure you've analyzed data from student learning, academic outputs, attendance, culture. And as Elizabeth alluded to, the Washington Post reported that we learned that the NAEP scores coming out of the COVID pandemic declined drastically across the entire nation. And so Congress, as a way to address that learning loss or the COVID slide, allocated $100 billion in coronavirus relief funding to schools, and a share of that must go to addressing learning loss. What we are proposing with this project here is to address student learning loss through the Summer Accelerated Learning Program with a focus on students who are disproportionately affected or impacted by the COVID pandemic. Next slide. Thank you. So with that said, we're going to stop and just either put in the chat your reaction to this question here. Who is a student or a group of students in your district that would benefit from summer accelerated learning opportunity? You don't have to name that student specifically. In fact, we ask that you don't. But what are you thinking? What are you wondering right now? Are you able to identify those students? What did you consider as you're thinking about those students?
This is TJ. I won't name names, but a family member of mine who's a student. Um, I just feel like through the pandemic, he, just wasn't really engaging like he had prior to the pandemic. And um, I also know that he loves the summer program in his town. I know that it's very focused on activities. He's kind of goes and plays a lot of sports and games and things like that. And I think someone like him, I think, who has like potential, but could use some of this sort of accelerated learning to kind of get him back into the game, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Next slide, please. So now that we have some background, some historical context, let's get into the details about this opportunity. So what are the opportunities for you and your district? And I'll show you tentatively the flow of the opportunities for this program, but please keep in mind, we're going to keep this at the forefront of our mind. This is highly customizable to fit your context and fit your needs. So the way it stands now, we are proposing 3 phases. And the first phase, actually, let me back up. The goal for our entire support is to partner with the districts as our participating districts. We are partnering with you to improve, to enhance your summer accelerated learning in your district by facilitating a learning strategy or practice. And here are ideas. So in phase 1, we plan to host 3 virtual cohort sessions that include summer programming leaders from districts across 3 states, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. In these sessions, we focus on the needs that you determine. In phase 2, we call that the implement phase. And as it stands now, we are available to facilitate coaching sessions with you or with your team as you revise and plan or enhance future summer programming. And then finally, phase 3, which is to share. We are, if desired, we are going to share the great work that you have done in phase 1, phase 2. And we do that through in-person convening where we gather and you can share with colleagues across the region just the great things that you've done in your summer. So now we've gone over sort of the details as they stand now for all the phases. Elizabeth will walk through the time commitments for this program.
Amir, thank you so much for that helpful overview. And apologies that some of this is cut off, but I think the most important information is still there, so that's good. We wanted to just share some of the details about the opportunity in terms of the time commitment and the activities that we're currently planning. And as Amir said, this is completely customizable. These dates here are tentative just to help with planning. So definitely something that can be discussed and adjusted depending on those who sign up to participate. More on that to come. So we are planning 3 90-minute virtual learning sessions in February, March, and April. That will include some topics of interest based on what we hear in our information sessions and what we hear from folks who sign up to participate in the boot camp. We also are looking to host and facilitate some peer sharing calls, and these would be facilitated discussions on key topics of interest, again, that are driven by you, your needs, your questions. Those would begin in May. They would be an hour in length, and we would schedule them around the cohort's availability. As Amir mentioned, 2 optional events or support that is also offered through the bootcamp: customized coaching, including some hour sessions with your dedicated coach, and an in-person convening. A one-day event based on schedules of the cohort that we would look to schedule to share out learnings, questions, learn from each other, connect, learn, and share. So that's what we're thinking here. I'll pause for just a minute to see if there are any questions about the purpose of the boot camp, who is invited to attend and participate, and any of these initial details. Feel free to come off mute or drop a question in the chat.
So Elizabeth, I'm doing some kind of quick math here, but it looks like, at a minimum, we're looking at 5 hours of time commitment, or roughly around, 5 to 8, depending on how much coaching I would want, right?
That's right, TJ. And an important thing that I should share, and I think Amir mentioned this in his overview, was we're not asking you to create anything new or anything like that. This is really designed to enhance and complement the work that you're already planning, the work that you're already doing, and to provide you with support. That's free of charge. All right, well, I'm not seeing any questions here in the chat, so I will keep us moving. We have been doing a lot of talking, and now we want to hear from all of you. This is where those polls come in that I mentioned at the start of our conversation today. So we want to hear your feedback, your needs around your summer programming, accelerated learning strategies that you're interested in learning more about. And so we are going to launch a few polls just to get your feedback. So in thinking about the format and participants for the activities that we talked about, the virtual learning sessions, the peer sharing calls. Again, those are those open dialogue discussions with the bootcamp cohort, customized coaching, and in-person convening, or something else that you're thinking that might be helpful as you're actively planning your summer offerings for this upcoming summer. We want to be responding to your needs, your interests, and your availability, what you think that you can take on, given the time commitment that we outlined. We also want you to be thinking about who in your district team would be the right person to join and participate in these activities. Is this for the summer programming director? Is this for your, a team of staff? Is this for your community partner that you're working with on some of your summer programs? So we'll launch some polls in just a minute and ask you to think about the types of activities and sessions that we've proposed and what would be most helpful, what you're interested in participating in. And then we'll launch a separate poll about who would be appropriate to attend and participate in some of these activities. So if you'll bear with me just a moment, I will launch our first poll.
While you're doing that, Elizabeth, I think I'll just say, I'm glad you mentioned the community-based partners. I think what we've learned through some of the summer planning that's been going on across the country, that these partnerships are often really critical to successfully carrying out summer programs. So as we were, putting this program together, thinking about how critical that was to include them if that's something that a district wanted to do.
Great, thanks, TJ. Seeing a few responses to the polls here. Looks like folks are interested in virtual learning sessions, peer sharing calls, custom coaching. Thank you all for sharing your feedback. I'll keep this open for 10 more seconds, and then we'll move on to our next poll. And again, if you have ideas for other activities that you'd like to see, drop them in the chat. All right. Well, thank you all for your feedback. I appreciate you sharing. We're going to go to our next poll and ask you to think about participants for these activities, for our virtual learning sessions, for our peer sharing calls. So you'll see multiple questions here for each type of activity. We're going to ask you to think about who would be the appropriate participants to join us. And again, if there are other folks that you're thinking about inviting or including, please feel free to note that in the chat for us, or think about that as you're thinking about your district team. And if there are, other ideas that you have, we welcome them. So if this is spurring some additional thinking, feel free to come off mute and drop your ideas in the chat. We'll leave this poll open a little bit longer. Right. Thank you all so much for sharing your feedback. It looks like summer programming director should be involved in all of these activities. That's not surprising. Okay, I'm going to end this poll now. Thank you all for sharing your feedback. Okay. All right, with that, I'm going to ask Amir to talk about possible content for our activities. Amir?
Yeah, so we are co-creating. I think you'll hear that theme reiterated several times. But here's a list of potential content for the virtual sessions and convening. And I'll give you 20 seconds just to peruse that list. As you're reading them, you can put in the chat anyone that needs further explanation, anyone that you're curious about particularly. Me personally, I'm curious about student recruitment and attendance. So if we were to have a session, either in the convening or our virtual sessions about student recruitment and attendance, some of the questions that we may seek to answer are, what is the research on consistent attendance in the summer programs? How do we develop accurate, timely, and personalized recruitment materials for students and families? We also may ask or seek to answer, how will we establish a clear attendance policy, and what incentive would be effective for students and families? So that sounds like some really interesting topics. I know I would want to go. Next slide, please. Thank you, actually. And then here are additional topics. These are more geared to the learning of the sessions. And actually, I meant what I meant to do. I meant to drop this poll. I apologize. I'm going to pause and give you a chance to give your insight into the topics. Please take the next 30 seconds to complete this poll here. Thank you, Elizabeth, for keeping me on track.
Amir, what is meant by like the enrichment activities one?
Yeah, great question. So we will think about the non-academic portion of your summer programming. So these are where your community partners will come in to provide that those. I mean, learning is fun too, right? But those fun sort of activities that are also enhancing the experience of our students. So some of the questions that we may seek to answer if we had a session on enrichment activities is, what is your enrichment model? How does it coincide with your academic schedule? How will we ensure that enrichment instructors have a strong content knowledge? And how would you train enrichment instructors to behave on behavior management strategies, given that they may not be a part of your school? TJ, I hope to answer your question.
Yep, thank you.
Absolutely. So we're finished our poll here. It looks like, yeah, we have everyone. Yeah, I think of the sessions that we have, folks are really interested in them. And great. Thank you. For our next slide here, these are some topics for the academic portion of the summer programming. And similarly like we had for the last slide, I'm going to give you an opportunity to engage here and via a poll. So I'm going to drop this poll here. Please take 30 seconds to engage us there. Feel free to elevate anything that we are missing in the chat.
Amir, as I look through this list, the topic around integrating social, emotional, and behavioral supports, so important. That's a topic that really speaks to me.
Absolutely. At least two other people also agree with you. So we have literacy as outcomes as getting all votes, integrating social emotional behavior supports as also a popular topic. And then as we had anticipated, accelerating math learning is also a popular topic. Thank you. All very helpful information for us to incorporate into our sessions. Now I'll pass it over to Elizabeth because we are at the end of our session to kind of wrap us up and move on to our next step.
Great. Thanks so much, Amir. And thanks to all of you for sharing your feedback and helping to inform and co-create our bootcamp sessions. We'll share a couple next steps, including how you can sign up for the bootcamp. And then we'll open up the discussion today for some questions. So 3 next steps. You can sign up to join us in the fun that is the boot camp that we have planned. You can sign up by accessing the link that Stephanie is going to drop in the chat for us. Thank you in advance, Stephanie. You'll be added to our bootcamp distribution list, and you'll receive information about our upcoming virtual learning sessions, including our first session that's scheduled in February. We'd also ask that you share information about this opportunity with your colleagues and others who might be interested or could benefit from participating in the bootcamp as part of your team. And then feel free to ask questions either today during our session in the chat or come off mute, or feel free to follow up with me. Stephanie will add my contact information, which you see on the slide, in the chat as well, in case there are some follow-up questions. So I will pause and see if there are any questions here in the chat. Stephanie, thanks so much for dropping that information in there. I appreciate it. And there might not be any questions because everything was so clear. Well, again, take some time, think about the information that we've shared today. And again, feel free to follow up with me if there are any questions. I'll pause for just a few more seconds and see if any questions come in. The last thing I'd say that as you're thinking about this opportunity, if there are networks within your district, state, that you would want to share information about the bootcamp to help us get the word out, feel free to pass on information about this opportunity with those who might be interested in participating and joining us. I'm not seeing any questions come in the chat. I'm not hearing any questions. I want to thank my Region 8 colleagues, TJ, Amir, Stephanie, for all of your work to prepare for our information session today, sharing information with folks during our session. I want to thank everyone who participated for your time today, all of your hard work on behalf of students in our region. We thank you for that. And we look forward to learning together and your participation in the bootcamp sessions, which will begin next month. So please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. Please sign up by the end of this month to get more information, get added to our bootcamp roster. And thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.